In a major tit-for-tat move, India has initiated a retaliatory effort against China's renaming exercise in Arunachal Pradesh. Modi 3.0 government intends to rename over 24 places in China's Tibet autonomous region as a response. The names will be released by the Indian Army and updated on their maps along the line of actual control. Well, this move comes as a retort to China's renaming of 30 places in Arunachal Pradesh earlier this year in April. Under the new NDA government, India will be assigning its own names to locations in occupied Tibet. The list comprises 11 residential areas, 12 mountains, 4 rivers, 1 lake, 1 mountain pass, and a piece of land presented in Chinese characters, Tibetan and Pinyin. Despite China's repeated claims over Arunachal, India has consistently affirmed that Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of our country. And now, with this big move of renaming places in Tibet, India's response to China is finally ready. We'll talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Manju Seth, former diplomat. Professor Madhav Nalabat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us on this program. Major General Sudhakar Ji, geopolitical expert, also with us on the show. Last but not the least, Mr. Alok Bansal, director of India Foundation, joins us on the broadcast as well. Professor Nalabat, I'll begin with you. Well, this tit-for-tat policy, how is China likely to respond to this? And, the big question that comes to everybody's mind, that China has been doing something like this for eons now. Why haven't we done this in the past?
Well, Vineet, you asked a very good question. China has been doing this right from the 1940s. You remember it grabbed Aksai Chin. And from then on, it's been one continuous story of attempted expansion. I'm very glad that Modi 3.0 is following the path set by Modi 2.0 in ensuring that China understands that India has got its options. I have always been surprised as somebody who has studied diplomatic relations between countries. Why, when China first said, we don't recognize the McMahon line, then India did not produce maps showing more than half of Tibet and adjoining areas from that were basically illegally accessed, annexed by Chinese provinces from Tibet, from what is really Tibet. Well, why we didn't say that, all right, yeah, the McMahon line is the only line that demarcates Tibet from India. So then we don't recognize your control over all these parts of Tibet. I think that ought to have been stand in the very beginning. Unfortunately, it was not. No previous government has stood up to China in this manner at all. They've only succumbed to Chinese bullying and to Chinese blandishments. And I think it's good that Prime Minister Modi, first of all, is trying to ensure that Indian businessmen do not, basically swell the coffers of the PLA by buying and buying and buying from China, because this money could end up harming India. And secondly, that on this Tibet, I strongly welcome this move for the simple reason that Tibet has never historically been a part of China. And the two countries most responsible, or I would say 3 countries most responsible for ensuring, in a sense, facilitating the Chinese takeover of Tibet in 1948, 49, 50, 51 were the United States, the UK and India, I'm sorry to say. Otherwise, these 3 countries or any 2 countries, India and the US together, could have prevented that, and the Tibetan people would have retained their freedom in a way that they lost completely by around 1951. Vineet.
All right. General Sudhakarji, is this also an indication of a new India that we are witnessing? Professor Nalapat enunciated very clearly, very vividly, that the previous governments were, perhaps busy kowtowing to China, and the fact that we have to respond in equal measure to what everything China does is the only way to tame the dragon.
Vineet, good evening. Thank you for getting me to your show. I can't agree with Professor Nalapat more, and I would compliment him. He deserves to have the last word on the subject. But being a student of India and China relationship and the border issue, I've been doing PhD on the subject, trying to find a practical solution. The answer lies in standing up to a bully. This is 21st century. And we have tried everything possible to find a practical, a reasonable takeaway with our northerly border. It's about time that we not only say, but we theoretically and also formally, we publish some documents, a digital platform, or let's say textbooks, or say audiovisual, to tell the world that India never had a border with China. We had a border with Tibet. We had a border with Turkey, East Turkestan. So these are the things we need to highlight. Kashgar, you talk about Zaidullah, you talk about Kailash Mansarovar, at the base of it there is a Minsa, there is to be an enclave. In the undivided British India Empire, we had all these places. We had Shigatse, we had Yartung, we had Gatok, all these places where we had the military bases. We had our telegraph system going right up to into the hinterland in Tibet. So it's about time that it is not, the answer doesn't lie in tit for tat. We need to have a long-term perspective. In the long-term perspective, we need to be mindful of the fact that post 2013, ever since Xi Jinping has come into power, there has been an aggressive projection of power by the China. It is not the theory of Deng Xiaoping which is being practiced. In that aggressive projection of power, they have resorted to this. In fact, I was starting in the 80s when China actually went hammer and tong in renaming the geographical features in South China Sea, and see what is happening in South China Sea. So therefore, it's very, very important and relevant to adopt a strategy, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Short-term, as per my analysis, could be 2 to 5 years. In that, we need to do everything to counter the strategy of China, call it containment, call it anything by any name, but we need to actually counter whatever steps they are taking. Tit for tat is one of the methods. I have been along the northern border. I have been telling my troops that eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Only then the Chinese will understand the best. That is one part. Second part, in the medium term, Vinit, I would say 5 to 10 years' time is the stage of compete. I am buying the time in my concept by thereby trying to highlight that we need to build our economy. As soon as our economy becomes $7 to $10 trillion, then no holds barred, we should go full hog, absolutely competing and contesting China. And last but not the least, when we come to the contestment of the contestation phase, say from 10 to 15 years or 20 years or 25 years, we should have developed a military capability so as to deliver a punitive deterrence. We must have the capability. Only then China, like a bully, is going to listen to us and stop doing what it is doing. Back to you, Vinit.
Right, and Ambassador Manju Seth, of course, this is an intrepid and a bold decision that India has taken, and something like Professor Nalapat and General Sudhakarji also alluded to should have been done earlier. But, what does diplomacy do now between India and China? Obviously, the Foreign Office in China is going to have its own objections. They usually retort, through their mouthpieces within China. But how are we planning and preparing to deal with this diplomatically?
The army would be, putting out the names. I think it's part of our diplomatic response that this government has taken, that we need to build a counter narrative and push it as vigorously as we can. And as very rightly mentioned by the general, when they started first renaming the South, places in the South China Sea and claiming, laying claim to them, the world thought it's, they took it lightly, and then we saw the result. And I think now in India, vis-a-vis India also, they have been, this has been going on since 2017, the renaming of various places within India. And we need to really build a very strong counter narrative. And of course, we need to reduce our dependency on the trade dependency on China, and build our own economy and build our own manufacturing base, and to strengthen our own capabilities. And diplomatically, as part of this strength, we speak from a position of strength, and then we will be able to make, negotiate more favorable terms for ourselves. Otherwise, we are going to carry on in this vein. And it's been, as we've been seeing, in all these, in the previous years, we've just been countering it, and they keep repeating it. We just say it's ludicrous and it's useless. It doesn't make a claim valid. Agreed. All this we need to do. We need to counter it, but we need to take steps. And I think this is the first step, that we have taken in in renaming names in Tibet, and also sending a message to the Chinese that you have to understand, and very rightly mentioned by the previous two panelists, we need to remember that this was not part of China. And China has signed the agreement with the British regarding the McMahon Line, which they are now completely reneging from. And I think that has to be understood, and we have to tell them that you have to stick to your commitments. And the only way, I think, diplomatically and economically, in defense capability, in every way, we have to strengthen ourselves and convey very categorically to the Chinese that it is no longer business as usual. You have to start understanding and respecting the other country as well. And you can't go on unilaterally laying claim to various areas in other countries. And especially, I think, what was really egregious was when PM Modi went to Arunachal and they tried to, object to that. I think that was absolutely not acceptable. And from then onwards, I think we have started taking a more proactive sort of stance. And I think we need to continue and put pressure on the Chinese and and negotiate from a position of strength in our defense, in our trade relations, in our diplomatic relations. Everywhere we need to make ourselves more capable, increase our capacities to be able to deal with China's attitude and China's need.
Mr. Bansal, considering that China is dealing with an internal implosion of its own sort when it comes to its economy and this exclusion from the rest of the world, a lot of companies moving out of China, how are they likely to deal with this kind of a move by India? There's a lot of dissent at home also against Xi Jinping, who's obviously looking for some sort of a leeway or some sort of an excuse to drive the attention from his failures to perhaps a conflict with India.
Absolutely, he's absolutely trying that.
Mr. Bansal, ma'am, that's for Mr. Bansal. Ma'am, that's for Mr. Bansal.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Mr. Bansal, go ahead.
Yeah. Firstly, we need to understand, yes, there is no doubt that there is a deep resentment even within the echelons of Communist Party as far as Xi Jinping's regime is concerned. In fact, if you talk to Chinese academics, Chinese scholars, or even members of the Communist Party in person, they often indicate their unhappiness with the way Xi Jinping is bolstering the authoritarianism and is actually reverting back to Maoist dogmas. So there is an anger, there is no doubt. The economy is actually not doing well. The housing bubble is crumbling. So there is all-round dismay as far as China is concerned. But still, China continues to be a much larger economy than ours, we need to understand. And I think this is a very, very right step in terms of renaming these towns in Tibet. But what is important is that we need to get the international community to start calling these places by these names. Because mere naming, like China has been doing, has got no meaning. Because nobody in the international community accepts the names given by China. They all still call these places as we call them. So what we need to do is that we need to transform that. I am personally not very convinced that China would like to get into a conflict with India to divert attention, because really vast multitude of Chinese population does not get distracted by a conflict with India. If it has to actually get into that sort of a adventure, then it would like to do something across Taiwan Strait, because that is something which affects each and every Chinese. The bulk of Chinese population relates to Taiwan or Republic of China, and that conflict brings US into the play. So that would be a real game changer as far as diverting attention is concerned. I think most Chinese, anyone who has been to China would realize, really don't know that India and China had gone to a war in 1962. That's the level of abysmal ignorance as far as even the educated lot in China is concerned. So if you have to divert attention, you have to really head for a conflict in the East. But I think the step by the government of India is a step in the right direction. And as General Sudhakarji said, that we need to bolster our economy. I think this is not the real time to get into unnecessary conflict. Our army is strong and is fit enough to give a befitting reply to Chinese on the northern borders. Our navy is strong and capable of interacting their trade in the Indian Ocean. What we need to focus right now is on economy. We are growing very fast. Last quarter, we grew by 8.2%, which is the fastest growth for a large economy. But in absolute terms, the growth is still below China's. So we really need to push it further and keep this pace of development sustained, because I'm sure in years to come, Chinese economy will start slowing down, and that is the time actually to catch up with China. And then once I think the economy grows, we will be in a position to do a lot. In fact, to retake the territory that we have lost out. We also need to get the central Tibetan administration located in McLeod on board as far as this renaming is concerned. Because if they also accept the names as given by us, then it would gain a lot of credibility rather than Indian Army calling particular places by a particular.
Absolutely, that's a good point, sir. And Professor Nalapat, of course, there's also this sense of continuity that has been communicated to China as Modi 3.0 returns, and that muscular policy, or rather, not getting browbeaten by China, is the policy that has been observed for the last 10 years, continues to exult.
Well, I am very delighted by this, and I fully agree with Alok. We need international partners. There's no question of going it alone where China is concerned, where security of the Indo-Pacific is concerned. Our interests are intertwined with the interests of several other countries, and that includes major countries such as the United States. There's no question about that. So this is a very interesting point, actually. All this the Chinese have done. As General Sudhakarji has said, they have grabbed the South China Sea, they have grabbed bits of territory everywhere, they have basically taken over half the legal airspace of Taiwan, more than half the sea space of Taiwan, and they are threatening to take over the land space of Taiwan. What is NATO doing about all this? I mean, Joe Biden, Olaf Scholz, Macron, Sunak, all of them talk every day about sovereignty and protecting sovereignty. From the 1940s onwards, the Chinese Communist Party has been trampling on sovereignty. And it has indulged in naked expansionism, not only across Taiwan Straits, but all across the Indo-Pacific, especially in the South China Sea, and to some extent the Himalayan Massif, until Prime Minister Modi put a stop to it by vigorous rebuilding of military formations. So I want to ask all these great leaders of NATO, the great champions of freedom, of sovereignty, of democracy, why are you sleeping where China is concerned? Or is it because, of some other reason? Maybe some of you have got your hands in your wallets and you don't want to see that wallet emptied. This is really disgusting, the double standard practiced by NATO while dealing with China.
Right. General Sudhakarji, your thoughts on what Mr. Bansal has said, and of course what Professor Nalapat also enunciated. India can't do it all alone. We need partners, we need support. And obviously, what the Americans have also shown in the last few years, that when it comes to China, there is unconditional support towards India.
Absolutely. I agree with all the previous co-panelists because anything to do with a country like China, we need to collaborate with like-minded nations with a common objective. And I tend to agree with Professor Nalapat when he says that all the while the whole world has been sleeping. We have very blindly outsourced everything, made it a manufacturing hub, knowingly or unknowingly. And now our dependencies is so much, it is so deeply penetrated that you call it de-risking, decoupling and diversification. It's not that easy. If it has taken 40 years to depend on China entirely, it will take double the time to actually dealing from China. So having said that, all I wish to recommend is that yes, first collaborate with the countries together, but be mindful of the fact that every nation has got its own national interest. If we have a conflict with China, the US is not going to stand and have boots on the ground, nor the UK, nor any country. It is we who have to fight. So therefore, building our capability, military capability, which is directly or indirectly dependent on our economic capacity, and all together put together called as comprehensive national power. Everything has to come into it. The whole of nation has to be applied here, and we need to build a stronger India, which the present government The Modi 3.0 has actually in earnest taken it up in a very serious mode. Compliments to the government. We need to take it up more seriously in times ahead. Back to you, Vinit.
Right, and of course, Mr. Bansal, the economy is a big aspect because, nothing intimidates China as much as economic powers do.
There is no doubt. I think that's why I said that we need to build up economy. But here I'd like to clarify. My argument has been twisted a bit. I'm not trying to say that other countries are needed to fight a war with China. We need other countries to authenticate what we are trying to do. If we rename a place, it will only gain credibility if others also start calling that place by that particular name. And it is here that the most important entity would be Central Tibetan Administration, which is located within our geographical frontiers. If they also start calling those places by that name, then it carries some amount of credibility. Otherwise, you may keep calling them by A, B, C or D. That doesn't carry conviction unless, of course, the rest of the world also does. And it has been the case with Chinese attempts also to rename things in Arunachal. Chinese may rename them as they feel like, but none of the major countries of the world have started using the Chinese nomenclature for these places. And so these Chinese attempts are nothing but at best a propaganda war. So this is what I wanted to say. There is no doubt that we need to build up our economy, and for building up that economy, I think we need certain amount of peace for certain number of years. And as I said, today I as a former military man have no doubt that our armed forces are quite strong enough to deter any attempt by China to infiltrate or carry out an incursion. So having said that, I think we need to focus more on economy. Economic development is the key. And I think now, as the most populous country in the world, we need to grow faster. We are already growing at 8.2%, which is fairly good, but we need to be consistent and consistently grow at this rate so that we start matching China and at some stage maybe overtake it, maybe in times to come.
Right, and Ambassador
Vinit, I just want to clarify. I did not mean boots on the ground. I meant, for example, defense companies from the United States, for example, locating in India. That's very essential. I'm sure Alok will agree with me.
Absolutely.
So that our own R&D is helped, and friend-shoring, companies from Taiwan that are moving from China, locate in India. That will be the way they can strengthen us. And eventually, should a war come, of course, the democracies will stand together. So I want to clarify very clearly. I respect Alok a lot as a military tactician. I don't mean boots on the ground. I mean equipment, I mean logistics, I mean technology, and most important, make in India. Make in India your advanced weaponry, because that is going to be a destination which is very crucial to you in securing the Indo-Pacific.
Right, absolutely. Ambassador Manjuseth, we've run out of time. In fact, we're not even running out of time. Would you like to weigh in on what you have heard? Concluding thoughts from you, ma'am?
Just one or two points that yes, our the warfare, now it's the age of information warfare. I think we need to up our game on that. And as I've said once before also, that this one China policy, we must really rethink that as well, and see if we can put pressure and and have a comprehensive narrative building and counter whatever China's intentions are.
Vinit, one point only.
Quickly,
point.
sir. Go ahead, sir.
Of the three warfare strategy of China, this cartographic warfare is part of the three warfare strategy to include media, psychological warfare, and legal. So they go step by step in order to legally claim any piece of land or territory, geographical piece of land. India also has to adopt a similar kind of strategy to contain and counter China effectively. Back to you, Vinit.
All right.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.